Hey y'all, it's Kim again. This is the KUBARK Counterintelligence Interrogation Techniques Manual type thing. This is the section labeled Interrogatee, and I'll put the description, I'll put the link in the description so you can actually go back and read it if you want. But anyway, so this is under the Interrogatee category. So let's go. It is not claimed that the classification system presented here is complete. Some interrogatees will not fit into any one of the groupings. And like all other typologies, the system is plagued by overlap, so that some interrogatees will show characteristics of more than one group. Above all, the interrogator must remember that finding some of the characteristics of the group in a single source does not warrant an immediate conclusion that the source belongs to the group, and that even correct labeling is not the equivalent of understanding people, but merely an aid to understanding. The 9 major groups within the psychological emotional category adopted for this handbook are the following: the orderly, obstinate character. People in this category are characteristically frugal, orderly, and cold. Frequently, they're quite intellectual. They are not impulsive in behavior. They tend to think things through logically and to act deliberately. They often reach decisions very slowly, and they're far less likely to make real personal sacrifices for a cause than to use them as a temporary means of obtaining a permanent personal gain. They are secretive and disinclined to confide in anyone else their plans and plots, which frequently concern the overthrow of some form of authority. They're also stubborn, although they may pretend cooperation or even believe that they are cooperating. They nurse grudges. The orderly, obstinate character considers himself superior to other people. Sometimes his sense of superiority is interwoven with the kind of magical thinking that includes all sorts of superstitions and fantasies about controlling his environment. He may even have a system of morality that is all his own. He sometimes gratifies his feeling of secret superiority by provoking unjust treatment. He also tries characteristically to keep open a line of escape by avoiding any real commitment to anything. He is, always has been, intensely concerned about his personal possessions. He's usually a tightwad who saves everything, has a strong sense of propriety, and is punctual and tidy. His money and other possessions have for him a personalized quality. They are parts of himself. He often carries around shiny coins, keepsakes, a bunch of keys, and other objects having for himself an actual or symbolic value. Usually, the orderly, obstinate character has a history of active rebellion in childhood, of persistently doing the exact opposite of what he's told to do. As an adult, he may have learned to cloak his resistance and become passive aggressive, but his determination to get his own way is unaltered. He has merely learned how to proceed indirectly if necessary. The profound fear and hatred of authority, persisting since childhood, is often well concealed in adulthood. For example, such a person may confess easily and quickly under interrogations, even to acts that he did not commit, in order to throw the interrogator off the trail of a significant discovery, or more rarely, because of feelings of guilt. The interrogator who is dealing with an orderly, obstinate character should avoid the role of hostile authority, threats and threatening gestures, table pounding, pouncing on evasions or lies, and any similarly authoritative tactics will only awaken in such a subject his old anxieties and habitual defense mechanisms. To attain rapport, the interrogator should be friendly. It will probably prove rewarding if the room and the interrogator look exceptionally neat. Orderly, obstinate interrogatees often collect coins or other objects as a hobby. A time spent in sharing their interests may thaw some of the ice. Establishing rapport is extremely important when dealing with this type. Optimistic, the optimistic character. This kind of source is almost constantly happy-go-lucky, impulsive, inconsistent, and undependable. He seems to enjoy a continuing state of well-being. He may be generous to a fault, giving to others as he wants to be given to. He may become an alcoholic or drug addict. He's not able to withstand very much pressure. He reacts to a challenge not by increasing his efforts, but rather by running away to avoid conflict. His convictions that something will turn up, that everything will work out all right, is based on his need to avoid his own responsibility for events and depend on a kindly fate. Such a person has usually had a great deal of overindulgence in early life. He's sometimes the youngest member of a large family, the child of a middle-aged woman, a so-called change of life baby. If he has met severe frustrations in later childhood, he may be petulant, vengeful, and consistently demanding. As interrogation sources, optimistic characters respond best to a kindly parental approach. If withholding, they can often be handled effectively by the Mutt and Jeff technique discussed later in this paper. Pressure tactics or hostility will make them retreat inside themselves, whereas reassurance will bring them out. They tend to seek promises to cast the interrogator in the role of the protector and problem solver. And it is important that the interrogator avoid making any specific promises that cannot be fulfilled, because the optimist turned vengeful is likely to prove troublesome. The greedy, demanding character. This kind of person affixes himself to others like a leech and clings obsessively. Although extremely dependent and passive, he constantly demands that others take care of him and gratify his wishes. If he considers himself wronged, he does not seek redress through his own efforts, but tries to persuade another to take up the cudgels on his behalf. Lets you and him fight. His loyalties are likely to shift whenever he feels that the sponsor whom he has chosen has let him down. Defectors of this type feel aggrieved because their desires were not satisfied in their countries of origin, but they soon feel equally deprived in a second land and turn against its government or representatives in the same way. The greedy and demanding character is subject to rather frequent depressions. He may direct a desire for revenge inward upon himself. In extreme cases, suicide may result. The greedy, demanding character often suffered from very early deprivation of affection or security. As an adult, he continues to seek substitute parents who will care for him as his own, he feels did not. The interrogator dealing with the greedy, demanding character must be careful not to rebuff him, otherwise rapport will be destroyed. On the other hand, the interrogator must not concede to demands which cannot or should not be met. Adopting the tone of an understanding father or big brother is likely to make the subject responsive. If he makes exorbitant requests, an unimportant favor may provide a satisfactory substitute because the demand rises not from a specific need, but as an expression of the subject's need for security. He's likely to find reassuring any manifestation of concern for his well-being. In dealing with this type, and to a considerable extent in dealing with any of the types here enlisted, the interrogator must be aware of the limits and pitfalls of rational persuasion. If he seeks to induce cooperation by an appeal to logic, he should first determine whether the source's resistance is based on logic. The appeal will glance off ineffectually if the resistance is totally or chiefly emotional rather than rational. Emotional resistance can be dissipated only by emotional manipulation. The anxious, self-centered character, although this person is fearful, he's engaged in a constant struggle to conceal his fears. He's frequently a daredevil who compensates for his anxiety by pretending that there is no such thing as danger. He may be a stunt flyer or circus performer who proves himself before crowds. He may also be a Don Juan. He tends to brag and often lies through hunger for approval or praise. As a soldier or officer, he may have been decorated for bravery, but if so, his comrades may suspect that his exploits resulted from a pleasure in exposing himself to danger and the anticipated delights of rewards, approval, or applause. The anxious, self centered character is usually intensely vain and equally sensitive. People who show these characteristics are actually usually fearful. The causes of intense, concealed anxiety are too complex and subtle to permit discussion of the subject in this paper. Of greater importance to the interrogator than the causes is the opportunity provided by concealed anxiety for successful manipulation of the source. His desire to impress will usually be quickly evident. He is likely to be voluble, ignoring or ridiculing his bragging or cutting him short with the demand that he get down to cases is likely to make him resentful and stop the flow. Playing upon his vanity, especially by praising his courage, will usually be a successful tactic if employed skillfully. Anxious, self-centered interrogatees who are withholding significant facts, such as contact with the hostile service, are likelier to divulge if made to feel that your truth will not be used to harm them, and if the interrogator also stresses the callousness and stupidity of the adversary in sending so valiant a person upon so ill-prepared a mission. There is little to be gained and much to be lost by exposing the non-relevant lies of this kind of source. Gross lies about deeds of daring, sexual prowess, or other proofs of courage and manliness are best met with silence or with friendly but non-committal replies unless they consume an inordinate amount of time. If operational use is contemplated, recruitment may sometimes be affected through such queries as, "I wonder if you would be willing to undertake a dangerous mission." The guilt-ridden character, this kind of person has a strong, cruel, unrealistic conscience. His whole life seems devoted to reliving his feelings of guilt. Sometimes he seems determined to atone. At other times, he insists that whatever went wrong is the fault of somebody else. In either event, he seeks constantly some proof or external indication that the guilt of others is greater than his own. He's often caught up completely in efforts to prove that he has been treated unjustly. In fact, he may provoke unjust treatment in order to assuage his conscience through punishment. Compulsive gamblers who find no real pleasure in winning, but do find relief is in losing belong to this class, So do persons who falsely confess to crimes. Sometimes such people actually commit crimes in order to confess and be punished. Masochists also belong to this category. The causes of most guilt complexes are real or fancied wrongs done to parents or others whom the subject felt he ought to love and honor. As children, such people may have been frequently scolded or punished, or they may have been model children who repressed all natural hostilities. The guilt-ridden character is hard to interrogate. He may confess to hostile clandestine activity or other acts of interest to KUBARK in which he was not involved. Accusations leveled at him by the interrogator are likely to trigger such false confessions, or he may remain silent when accused, enjoying the punishment. He is a poor subject for L.C. Flutter. The complexities of dealing with conscience-ridden interrogatees vary so widely from case to case that it is almost impossible to list sound general principles. Perhaps the best advice is that the interrogator, once alerted by information from the screening process, see parts, what is that, 6, or by the subject's uh, excessive preoccupation with moral judgments, should treat as suspect and subjective any information provided by the interrogatee about any matter that is of moral concern to him. Persons with intense guilt feelings may cause or cease resistance and cooperate if punished in some way because of the gratification induced by punishment. The character wrecked by success is closely related to the guilt-ridden character. This sort of person cannot tolerate success and goes through life failing at critical points. He's often accident prone. Typically, he has a long history of being promising and of almost completing a significant assignment or achievement, but not bringing it off. The character who cannot stand success enjoys his ambitions as long as they remain fantasies, but somehow ensures that they will not be fulfilled in reality. Acquaintances often feel that his success is just around the corner, but something always intervenes. In actuality, this sometimes is a sense of guilt of the kind described above. The person who avoids success has a conscience which forbids the pleasures of accomplishment and recognition. He frequently projects his guilt feelings and feels that all of his failures were someone else's fault. He may have a strong need to suffer and may seek danger or injury. As interrogatees, these people who cannot stand prosperity pose no special problem unless the interrogation impinges upon their feelings of guilt or the reasons for their past failures. Then subjective distortions, not facts, will result. The successful interrogation will isolate this area of unreliability. The schizoid or strange character lives in a world of fantasy much of the time. Sometimes he seems unable to distinguish reality from the realm of his own creating. The real world seems to him empty and meaningless in contrast with the mysteriously significant world that he has made. He's extremely intolerant of any frustration that occurs in the outer world and deals with it by withdrawal into the interior realm. He has no real attachments to others, although he may attach symbolic or private meanings or values to other people. Children reared in homes lacking in ordinary affection and attention or in orphanages or state-run communes may become adults who belong to this category. Rebuffed in early efforts to attach themselves to another, they become distrustful of attachments and turn inward. Any link to a group or country will be undependable and, as a rule, transitory. At the same time, the schizoid character needs external approval. Though he retreats from reality, he does not want to feel abandoned. As an interrogatee, the schizoid character is likely to lie readily to win approval. He will tell the interrogator what he thinks the interrogator wants to hear in order to win the award of seeing a smile on the interrogator's face. Because he's not always capable of distinguishing between fact and fantasy, he may be unaware of lying. The desire for approval provides the interrogator with the handle, whereas accusations of lying or other indications of disesteem will provoke withdrawal from the situation. Teasing the truth out of the schizoid subject may not prove difficult if he is convinced that he will not incur favor through misstatements or disfavor through telling the truth. Like the guilt-ridden character, the schizoid character may be an unreliable subject for testing by Elsie Flutter because his internal needs lead him to confuse fact with fancy. He's also likely to make an unreliable agent because of his incapacity to deal with facts and to form real relationships. The exception believes that the world owes him a great deal. He feels that he suffered a gross injustice, usually early in life, and should be repaid. Sometimes the injustice was meted out impersonally by fate as a physical deformity or extremely painful illness or operation in childhood, or the early loss of one parent or both. Feeling that these misfortunes were undeserved, the exception regard them as injustices that someone or something must rectify. Therefore, they claim as their right privileges not permitted others. Oh, excuse me. Therefore, they claim as their right privileges not permitted others. Okay. When the claim is ignored or denied, the exceptions become rebellious, as adolescents often do. They are convinced that the justice of the claim is plain for all to see, and that any refusal to grant it is willfully malignant. When interrogated, the exceptions are likely to make demands for money, resettlement aid, or other favors, demands that are completely out of proportion to the value of their contributions. Any ambiguous replies to such demands will be interpreted as acquiescence. Of all the types considered here, the exception is likeliest to carry an alleged injustice dealt him by KUBARK to the newspapers or the courts. The best general line to follow in handling those who believe that they are exceptions is to listen attentively within reasonable time limits to their grievances and to make no commitments that cannot be discharged fully. Defectors from hostile intelligence services, doubles, provocateurs, and others who have more than passing contact with Sino-Soviet service may, if they belong to this category, prove unusually responsive to suggestions from the interrogator that they have been treated unfairly by the other service. Any planned operational use of such persons should take into account the fact that they have no sense of loyalty to a common cause and are likely to turn aggrievedly against superiors. The average or normal character is not a person wholly lacking in the characteristics of the other types. He may, in fact, exhibit most or all of them from time to time, but no one of them is persistently dominant. The average man's qualities of obstinacy, unrealistic optimism, anxiety, and the rest are not overriding or imperious except for relatively short intervals. Moreover, his reactions to the world around him are more dependent upon events in that world and less the product of rigid subjective patterns than is true of the other types discussed. That's the other clues. Okay. The true defectors, as distinguished from the hostile agent in defectors' guise, is likely to have a history of opposition to authority. The sad fact is that defectors who left their homelands because they could not get along with their immediate or ultimate superiors are also likely to rebel against authorities in the new environment, a fact which usually plays an important part in redefection. Therefore, defectors are likely to be found in the ranks of the orderly obstinate, the greedy and demanding, the schizoid, and the exceptions. Experiments in statistical analysis performed at the University of Minnesota concerned the relationship among anxiety and affiliative, I can't say that, tendencies, desires to be with the other people. On the other hand, in the ordinal position, rank, and birth sequence on the other. Some of the findings, though necessarily tentative and speculative, have some relevance to interrogation. As is noted in the bibliography, the investigators concluded that isolation typically creates anxiety, that anxiety intensifies the desire to be with others who share the same fear, and that only and firstborn children are more anxious and less willing or able to withstand pain than later born children. Other applicable hypotheses are that fear increases the affiliative needs of firstborn and only children much more than those of the later born. These differences are more pronounced in persons from small families than in those who grew up in large families. Finally, only children are much likelier to hold themselves together and persist in anxiety producing situations than are the firstborn, and who more frequently try to retreat. In the other major respects, intensity of anxiety and emotional need to affiliate, no significant differences between first and onlys were discovered. It follows that determining the subject's ordinal position before questioning begins may be useful to the interrogator, but two cautions are in order. The first is that the findings are, at this stage, only tentatively hypotheses. The second is that even if they prove accurate for large groups, the data are like those in actuarial tables. They have no specific predictive value for individuals. Okay, and that was the end of that. I said to finish that last part because it cut off on me. Ugh. Anyway, I'll get this loaded up. I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.